Well, hello there. It's Kath Langman here, back with another episode of the Productpreneur Success podcast. And today on the show, I'm actually going to share a little bit about the story of my own business journey that, I think will really speak to some of the fears and anxieties that are really common for so many of us entrepreneurs, so many of you as well. And, I guess just give you a few insights about my journey and how I got through some of those things. Now I'm sure that we've all, experienced this roller coaster of emotions on our entrepreneurial journey. I know I'm not alone in that regard, and that's why I really wanted to share my side of the story. And aside from the fact that it's very easy, I think, for all of us operating in the online world to want to stick to the highlight reel, all of the glossy highlights and the positives from our journeys, and not kind of speak to any of the difficulties along the way, and to try and keep those fears and anxieties a little bit more private. And I don't know, I mean, I think maybe that's starting to change a little bit on social media. There's more people who are keeping it a little bit more real with their content and not just posting the glossy unreal highlights. But I also think it's common, though, for a lot of people to perceive others as successful and assume that they didn't deal with any hardships on the way. Now, I think I mentioned this maybe on the show a while back, but I read a book last year. I think it was David Goggins' second book, Never Finished. The first book was great too, You Can't Hurt Me, but the second book, Never Finished. And in the book, he talks about how so many of us start something, whether that's a business or whether it's working to some other sort of big goal, like an athletic one, perhaps, which was his case. Or actually, he was a Navy SEAL first. But anyway, at the starting line, we are super excited, about how awesome whatever it is we're about to do is. We're excited by the anticipation of it. We're excited by the big vision. We're excited about the possibilities and all that kind of stuff. But the minute things get really hard, we assume that by the simple fact that it's hard, it means we must not be cut out for it after all. We couldn't possibly succeed when we see other people supposedly finding things easy. So I want to speak to that today. And I really want to talk about this fear that a lot of us have. What if my business fails? And then also, many of us have that kind of fear of success as well, whether that's conscious or unconscious, because if we succeed on a really big scale, by whatever, scale that looks like for you, what will our friends and family think? Will they still accept us, or will they think we're some kind of greedy bastard? So here's what's on the other side of those fears, however. Number one, financial independence with autonomy. And by that I mean, with choice over how you spend your time, without being dictated to by bosses, and without the inflexibility of set working hours and office locations and all of that. Number two, rock solid confidence, that you can do and achieve anything you set your mind to, that you can set goals and achieve them, that you can overcome challenges and push past fears. And number three, for many of you, like for me, you get to set those two examples to your kids as well. Now, is it all sunshine and rainbows? What's that phrase? Is it all sunshine and rainbows? I think maybe some people look at me and think that maybe that's how it is for me. No, I ain't going to lie to you about that. It's not real life anyway, However, what is possible is to be a little bit, or possible to become or learn, is to be a bit less fatalistic about the hard times and a bit more accepting and confident that they will pass, and they're just a little bit of a blip on your way to achieving your next goal. Now, before we get to the meat and potatoes of this episode, I want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by the Productpreneur Academy. And in particular, I want to let you know about the special offer we have on our flagship program, the E-commerce Growth Accelerator. There's a little known insider tip that can spare e-commerce businesses like yours, from burnout and overwhelm, and, from all that energy spent on the grind and hustle approach, networking in Facebook groups, designing beautiful Instagram reels, and all of that other low stakes stuff, because all of that just leads to scraping by. But there is some good news. There is a way to break free from that kind of struggle while boosting sales. And to help you with that, I am opening enrollment again in my e-commerce accelerator. to help you skyrocket those website traffic and sales big time. With so many people ordering from online, online business is still booming. Even though it feels like it might have slowed a little bit since COVID times, it is still booming. But that also does mean that it is getting a little harder to stand out amongst the competition. So I want to give you the keys to success. I want to show you the ropes, as the saying goes. So that you can learn how to get the attention and how to achieve the consistent traffic that converts into sales. So in my 3-month coaching program, you will discover strategies to boost traffic and your website traffic and sales, automate those sales with email funnels, create profitable ads, and so much more with weekly live group coaching calls as well. So this program is created to give more than information. It's designed to really empower e-commerce brand owners with the tools they need to really conquer their niche like a pro. And that's why I have developed a strategy that is a replicable process that each of you can apply in your own business. By implementing what I teach, those dribs and drabs of unreliable traffic and sales will become a thing of the past. I know from experience that, these results are repeatable and can be even unbeatable as well. And past clients of ours agree with that as well. For example, Christy from Baby Aiders, she had this to say about it. In a year, I've experienced nearly 4,000% sales growth, growing from 4 figures per year to multiple 6 figures. This is my business Bible. So if you're ready to experience growth like Christy and so many more, right now you can actually save 25% off the full price of the program. And I'm also giving away a bonus pack worth over $1,200 for every new enrollee. So if you want to join before midnight this Sunday, the 3rd of September, you can fast track your business to the next level, and the strategies to success are literally just around the corner for you. If you want to jump on, head to productpreneuracademy.com/accelerator, and I will of course include that link in the podcast show notes. Now, let's do as Maria from The Sound of Music suggests and start from the very beginning, which is a very good place to start. I feel like I probably always had some entrepreneurial tendencies. I remember when I was a little kid, I used to create these little shops and be making products and artworks and food treats and things like that. And I'd set up a little shop at the front fence, and I'd be trying to flog off stuff to my neighbors as they walked past. And I roped my younger sister into this as well. I'd be instructing her, we need to do this many pieces of artwork. We've got to do these drawings and these paintings. We're going to make these chocolate treats or biscuits or whatever it was. And then I would rope her into doing these shops at the front fence as well, which is kind of hilarious. Of course, I did go on to go to university and followed that conventional career direction, and that, like many of you as well, came to a little bit of a stop or a pause after I had my babies. Now, of course, they're not babies anymore, they're teenagers, but at that point in time, my career had been in advertising and design agencies, working with lots of different clients like Microsoft and Coca-Cola and Blackmores and various others. And it was a pretty good career. I was living in Sydney, and then I had my first baby and I went on maternity leave, and I fully anticipated that I would go back to that job. But as it transpired, I managed to fall pregnant again before that maternity leave was over. And so I wouldn't have been able to go back to that job for very long. But also my boss at the time was not very supportive of having part-time or flexible work opportunities either. And he basically said, Catherine, it's full-time or nothing, which legally he was allowed to say at that point in time. I think the laws have changed since then. But I thought, well, living in Sydney, there's long travel time to get to work and get home again. And if I have 2 babies, they're going to be 2 babies in childcare, which is very expensive. And then I would never really see them because I'd either be driving to work or at work or driving home from work all day. And so I made the decision that, well, it just felt like I was backed into a corner, really. I had to give up that career for a short while. And so I had my babies, and I don't know that I necessarily expected that I was going to start a business after that, but that's kind of what happened. And I guess I always also had a bit of an example from my own mum, who was very entrepreneurial herself and managed to create a career for herself that was really, that she was able to fit in around the 5 children that she had. So my mum, she initially lived in a country town with her first husband, had 3 children, and they had 3 businesses. And unfortunately, I think when my older sister, who was my mum's third child, was about 5 years old, my mum's first husband died in a car accident. And so she was left with these three kids and three businesses at a time in life, or a time in the past times where women weren't really allowed to own property. They weren't really allowed to own businesses or anything like that. My mum's 83 now, so that kind of gives you an idea of that generation and how things were. So anyway, I guess by default, she ended up a business owner and a property owner. So she was a bit of a trailblazer by accident, I guess. But anyway, she ended up selling two of those businesses and she kept the third one, which was the most profitable. And it was a shoe store. And she used that business and the overdraft on that business to buy a house in the city. And she moved her family to the city. And then she decided she was going to retrain in another career direction that she was a little bit more passionate about than selling shoes. But she kept that business and operated it from a distance. And this was well before the internet. The internet probably, I'm sure it was dreamed of, but it wasn't really invented or in use, not for decades, really. So, it's pretty amazing what she did. And so she was able to buy the house that she, bought in the city. She owned the house outright, and then she sold, or paid it off and eventually owned it outright. And then she sold the business and funded her future existence with her children. And then, of course, she met my dad and had two more kids, which is where I came along. So the moral of all of this is that I had this example of a mother who was like, well, to hell with you then. I mean, not that she said that, she would never speak like that, obviously, a woman of her generation. You just don't say that. But she made these choices and took these actions out of necessity. She was solving a problem. But for me, it was like, okay, well, if I can't have that because that man over there is going to stop me from having my career, what can I do? I don't want to be left behind. I worked pretty hard to get to this point. So ultimately, I decided to go into business. I felt surely there's a way to replace my professional income, my wages, and do it in a way like my mum had that was a bit more flexible around having children. So I went into business at my first business was with a friend who had been hand making products for babies that I'd been using and loving, but she didn't really know anything about business or about marketing. And so she was looking for someone with those skills, which of course I had. So we started the business with a very low, commitment in terms of financial investment. I don't think either of us had much in regards to that anyway. And the way that we got moving was with the handmade products made in small batches, a quick website that we'd done ourselves. It was pretty hideous. And really, we were looking for that minimum viable product stage of business. I didn't even know what that term meant at the time, but that's what we were doing intuitively. And so that version of the product that had just enough features to be able to be used by early customers who could then, provide feedback for future improvements, which of course we did go on to bring some of those design improvements into things down the track. But we were also looking for a bit of a marketing formula that would convert sales at a profitable price. And I guess we were both mums. We had two similar age boys each, and we were wanting to run this online, in a way that was really flexible. And so we were really keen to adopt the whole e-commerce model, which is so ubiquitous now, but in 2006, 2007, not so much. And I remember at that point in time, it was probably the first hints of fear getting in the way of things a little bit. I remember I was just wanting to get started in this business and was trying to sell the idea to my husband and to get him on board, and he was pretty fine with it. But his mother was not so keen on the idea, not that she was really going to have a say in that matter. But anyway, I just distinctly remember at the time she said to me, Catherine, you should really just be grateful with what you've got, the income that your husband's making, and you should just make do. Thankfully, she has gone on to become one of my biggest cheerleaders over the years, so I don't hold a grudge against her for that comment. But at the time, I just remember thinking, right, well, I'm going to prove you wrong, aren't I? And I think at the same time, or a similar time, I'd probably been telling family and friends and announcing this new business. And I also remember my former boss also made some comments at the time about how unprofessional it was to run a business from home. And you can't do that. You'll never get anywhere. I imagine he would have struggled a bit in COVID lockdowns. So anyway, those kinds of comments, they did get under my skin. I'm sure I'm not unusual that it would, it did raise a few fears and insecurities about whether I was making a stupid mistake and maybe I'd make a total fool of myself and it would never work. Somehow or other, I did move forward and we did move forward. And I guess, once we did have that proof of concept, and it didn't take that long really, the proof that there was consumer demand for the products. And so after that, what we actually did is that we took that evidence that we had and those performance metrics, not that I knew the terms like that back then. We took all of that data and information to the bank and managed to get a $20,000 micro business loan. And we also found an offshore manufacturer who could mass produce these products for us, because it was pretty obvious there's no way you're going to scale a business if you had just one person sewing and one person marketing. That was not going to get us anywhere fast. And yes, we did look for an onshore manufacturer, but at the time we were literally quoted, only one Australian-based factory quoted us. They quoted us the price that we knew would be the upper limit retail price to make the products as long as we supplied the cut materials. So that wasn't going to work. Anyway, we outsourced offshore, we contracted this manufacturer, and I guess, that really catapulted the business into the world. But of course, I'm only human, and taking that financial risk definitely tested my confidence and resolve. I think it's hard not to think about, what if this doesn't work, and what if I lose it all, and will I be okay? Will my family be secure? And, guess what happened when we received that first shipment of mass-produced product from our factory? Do you think I went on to enjoy overnight success and make my business into a smash hit straight away? No. That first shipment arrived and literally a third of it was faulty. It might have been even more than that. I don't even remember. But I remember the feelings of utter devastation because, you go through this process, the prototyping process, the sampling, etc. It's all perfect, and then you get this delivery and it's not. But I share this with you because I know so many of you have experienced this as well. So none of us is unique in that, right? At the time, we spent a lot of time fixing as much as we could and salvaging what we could so that we could still sell a quality product that did what it said on the tin, and somehow managed to make a profit on that first run. And I think the only thing that really helped me pass those fears and anxieties at that time was to really keep focusing on whatever positive evidence that I could find at hand. Customers were buying and loving the products, and more customers were contacting us and wanting to buy from us, and, wholesalers and export people as well. And I guess up until that point, with hand making stuff, you only had what you could make, right? You could only sell what you could make. So there was always more demand than we could fulfill, and I had to focus on that rather than on that shitty first experience with that manufacturer. Beyond that, what really helped us to get off onto a good path of growth was not just investing in the product, but also investing in some of the marketing related assets, like, really great photography and videos, and a much better looking website that had better functionality and, was faster and all of that kind of stuff. Had a better sales conversion rate. So, something that was really going to look a lot more professional and designed to convert at a better rate. But then also we did probably the biggest marketing spend. Was a huge investment at the time, but that really got us off to a good start. At the time for us, that was exhibiting at some of the baby expos around Australia. So that really gave us a big boost in brand awareness, but also being the kind of product that people really did, it was so new and people really needed to see it in person to be educated on, how to use it and, how easy it was, and to really understand the whole system. For those of you who don't know, these were reusable modern cloth nappies, or diapers, as you might call them, depending on where you live. And so, we didn't have a shop front, and we really needed to be able to get in front of customers. So, like I said, they were really new products in the marketplace at that time. So it wasn't something that people were familiar with. And so that was a way of getting that education happening in the marketplace. And things really started to take off after that. And as I said, I initially went into the business to replace my professional wage with more flexible work conditions, but I soon started to have a much bigger ambition. And really, it wasn't just about being able to make more money for myself and my family. That was absolutely still part of it. Obviously, we had to live, but truthfully, I wasn't overly motivated by enormous piles of money. It was much more like, I was really motivated to create some measurable, positive change in the environment, trying to decrease the amount of disposable single-use waste that was going into landfill. And so that was a huge part of what was motivating me to create that kind of positive change in the world. But it was also around creating flexible work opportunities for other women, other mothers specifically, whose careers may have also been thwarted after having children like mine was. And so I went on to grow a team, almost all women, not all women, but mostly. And we got up to about 35 on our sales team who were working with us, and our team operating in the warehouse as well. It was incredibly satisfying. Now, we know there's still a large wage gap between men and women in Australia and around the world in developed countries. This lack of financial independence or wage parity between men and women, and even bigger wage gap between women in minority groups, is a big part of what really does still drive me today, and why I'm such a huge advocate for women starting e-commerce businesses. E-commerce is such a hugely scalable business model, and it does have enormous financial upside, but it can also be operated in a way that's really flexible around everyday life. So, that's why I still do what I do, right? But anyway, back to my own journey. Of course, it wasn't smooth sailing after that initial kickstarting with the business loan and getting a manufacturer and all of that stuff. I think it's easy for some people to look at somebody else like me and think, oh, you're really successful. You must have had all of these opportunities handed to you, and it must have been easy for you, blah, blah, blah. It's not like that. Of course, it wasn't smooth sailing. I don't think life or business ever is for anyone. So hopefully you're getting the gist here. I think that as you go through and go on with business, you just get a little bit more okay with not letting problems get to you. We definitely had things like production issues ongoing, it was always something different, right? Shipping issues. And as we grew, we had staff issues and differences in opinion about how we should run and grow. You name it, I'm sure it probably happened. I think one thing I definitely learned the hard way was, how do you switch off? How do you manage the stresses of running your own business? I'm probably a bit of a stress head anyway, but as an entrepreneur, it is really hard not to take in, all of this stuff personally, the down stuff and the upside. And it's really hard to pace yourself and not feel like you need to be working all the time, for fear that you're going to miss out on the next sale or the next big opportunity. So I don't remember what it was that really triggered that mindset for me, because it's a while ago now, but I think it was a bit of maybe the advent of social media. You definitely feel more switched on all the time, like you're connected all the time, and customers are messaging you late at night and on weekends. And eventually I just got to the point where my kids were getting a little bit older and they were starting to play weekend sport. And I was like, I started my business so that I could be more flexible and be around with my kids more. What am I doing? The world's not going to come to a crumbling halt if I don't answer this message on the weekend. Good thing is, there's a lot of automated messages that you can now set up, so people aren't feeling ignored. Customers aren't feeling ignored. But, what I want to talk about just briefly, there's a lot of evidence now from psychologists and neuroscientists about the benefits of psychologically detaching from work. Basically, you end up being far more productive and having far more impact on the growth of your business if you do take time away from the day-to-day running of your business. Partly it's to relax and recoup your energy, and it's also partly because it gives you the time and the space to learn new things and come up with new ideas. Without taking the time to regain your energy and to learn new things or come up with new ideas, it's impossible to grow. Literally, when you're tired and you're hustling all the time, the only thing you can do is more of the same. And that is not going to get you anywhere different from where you are now. So back to my story. So some of you know that particular business, I got to a point where I achieved what I could with it. And in 2014, mid-2014, I sold out of that business. And then I guess I returned to my roots as a marketing consultant, where I felt I could use both my business and my previous career experiences to really help other entrepreneurs create successful businesses for themselves. I started my own digital marketing agency and also my online education platform. I reckon probably over the last 20 something years since I started my career, I've probably worked with hundreds, probably actually more likely thousands of brands and e-commerce retailers. I've definitely seen some thrive. Some of them have grown super fast and some of them at a more steady pace. And I've also seen some go absolutely nowhere and completely fizzle out. And I've seen some businesses fail fairly spectacularly with a bit of a train wreck. I think probably I would describe my own first business growth as, well, and this business too, as more of a steady pace. That's what I felt like I could manage at the time, in the way that I'm happy to work. I am a sprinter. That's my energy system. I can't run marathons. I need to take a measured approach. But what I've observed about the businesses that really don't take off and just fizzle out, and I want to speak to this because I think this really does tie in with that fear. What if I fail in my business? And so the ones that don't take off and they just fizzle out, what I observe is that they're really just starved of the right inputs that drive growth. Of course, definitely, there are the occasional business that might get off the ground, but there's just no demand for the product. But I'm not talking about that sort of situation. If it is a good product and customers do want it, but the business does not really take off and it just fizzles out, generally it's because the business has been starved of the right inputs that drive growth, aka a sales strategy. Now, money to an extent is part of what helps, but that's actually far less critical to success than many people think and believe. Testing your marketing to get to the right formula for attracting and converting customers is one of the inputs for sure. And then, the confidence to go for it after that, it's a bit like buying yourself some beautiful pot plants and then not giving them any water or sunshine because you're afraid you'll stuff it up. And I do think that confidence is probably the most important ingredient. And I think it's finding the way to have confidence in your own abilities to figure stuff out that you don't know yet. I'd say confidence and commitment, maybe commitment first, because you can't be confident sometimes until you've done something. So we have to commit to commit to the goal or commit to the endeavor first and take action. And then we get the confidence from those actions. But, also just the belief in yourself that things will be okay, even if we do stuff something up and we do feel like we've got egg on our face or we've failed at something. I definitely think that fear of failure holds so many of us back from actually taking the right step or taking any step forward in our business. But what about the ones that actually do grow big and then have a spectacular downfall? Why does that happen? Because I've actually seen this happen too. I've seen it from the outside looking in. I think all of us have seen that in the media over the last 18 months. You read stories, but I've actually seen it in more detail than I really care to think about. And I'm going to share this story with you as well, even though it's not the nicest thing for me to remember. So my husband, my wonderful supportive husband, who's a pharmacist, he used to work for his uncle who owned several pharmacies and medical centres. There were several locations across the East Coast. It was about a $65 million a year revenue operation. I don't remember how many locations they had or how many staff or anything like that. But unfortunately, my husband's uncle had pretty much been too ambitious and expanded too quickly, taking on enormous amounts of debt to fund that growth. And a lot of businesses did that at that point in time because interest rates were really, really cheap. So they had a lot of bank debt and they had, they also had a lot of credit from suppliers. Their main supplier gave them 120 days payment terms, which is insane. They grew really, really fast in terms of revenue growth, but it just wasn't quite enough or profitable enough to ultimately fund that debt, or repaying the debt rather, when the time came. And I failed to mention that they had quite long interest-free periods on those loans as well. Again, super common at that point in time. Obviously the last 18 months have been very different with bank loans and mortgages, as we all know. But then, so obviously interest payments kicked in. Then also the suppliers called in those payment terms. They wanted to rein them into the regular 30 days payment terms. And when that all hit at once, the whole entity went under. This huge business that had so much revenue turnover, all this staff and everything. And so my husband's uncle lost everything he owned, all his personal property and assets, as well as all of the business. All the employees, including my husband, they lost their jobs. They didn't just lose their jobs, they lost all their holiday leave and superannuation and all the other entitlements. And it transpired that my husband's uncle had been kind of taking advantage of him and not paying him any superannuation that entire time. So it was great. Not. So we were definitely severely impacted by that collapse as well. But what I want to share is, having seen this happen from the inside, the biggest thing that I can say in that scenario was that he took on far too much debt in the hopes of growing and expanding really quickly, which it did, but it didn't work ultimately because he didn't have a formula for profitably attracting new customers to grow sales. Literally, there was no customer acquisition model at all. It was all hope marketing and there was no sales strategy. Literally, their sales strategy was, let's hope a customer comes and finds us and buys what's on the shelf. And that's fine whilst he had a big bank loan to fund things. But when that cash runway ran out, he was screwed. And I see so many of you doing the same thing too. And so I'll say to you what I learned from observing him. How's that working for you? I truly hope that you are motivated to fix that situation before it gets to that kind of extreme state. So what is the sweet spot for that long-term sustainable and profitable growth? Because obviously no one wants to go through that scenario. And look, I'll say we've come out of it, we weren't the business owners in that, that scenario, but, even though we were pretty affected by it, we came out the other end and the sun keeps coming up in the morning. People forget that this has happened and, so we don't need to feel ashamed. People forget and you move on with your life. And I do want to put a caveat in here and to say, I know there's a lot of people around who have been through far worse experiences than this. So I don't want to take anything away from anyone's life experiences. This is mine. This is my story. But at the end of the day, I don't know that we necessarily need to fear failure in business. I certainly think that, we want to make sure that we avoid that scenario in the first place, but avoid it in a way that doesn't stop you from moving forwards in your business, right? So what is that sweet spot for long-term sustainable and profitable growth? You really do need to give your business some oxygen and invest some time and money to get that proof of concept and to get your marketing converting profitably, and then scale up at a sustainable pace. This means that you must figure out a sales strategy that consistently delivers you new and repeat customers. You must figure out what marketing strategies, what are the inputs you need to implement to drive the consumer demand or to increase the consumer demand and to drive that sales growth. Don't get greedy and expand beyond your means using debt to fund massive, fast growth. Before you drop some serious coin on your ads or other marketing strategies, it is best to try and have figured out that sales strategy first. It is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. You have to invest some, but you figure this sales strategy out before you just go nuts taking out massive, $1 million loans, right? The other thing that I've observed that leads to failure is either continuing to do the same as you are now or just not taking any action at all, doing nothing. Remember, you are operating in a dynamic commercial environment. Things change around you. Consumer demand fluctuates. New competitors enter the market. If you do not invest the time and money in actually figuring out and implementing a sales strategy, not only will you not grow, you will actually decline. And I don't want that for you, and I'm sure you don't want it either. Luckily, there is a proven process that you can follow to design the perfect sales strategy for your online business that will grow your business from the world's best kept secret into a thriving hub of e-commerce sales activity. And I want to teach it to you. If you are keen to learn it, I'd love to invite you to join me inside my e-commerce growth accelerator program at just $119 per week over 13 weeks. This is going to be the most affordable way to get your hands on this high impact training and get my help to tailor it to your business and implement everything accurately. If you want to check it out, all you need to do is head to www.productpreneuracademy.com/accelerator. Now, doors do close on this cohort at midnight this Sunday, 3rd of September. Yes, that is Father's Day here in Australia. So if you want to massively turn around your online store and generate some incredible growth inside of this side of Christmas, and you really want to ensure that you get the best possible results from this year's peak sales season, hello, Black Friday, you're coming, then now is your opportunity. And I really hope to see you in there. But for now, that does bring us to the end of this week's episode. I really hope that you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to being back with you on the show again next week. Bye for now.